Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. God has given us unlimited treasures in His Word. Every time we open it, we can discover a new treasure or admire an old one. What will we find today? Here's Carla Early with Treasure Hunt in the Word.
The book of John has 21 chapters, but as I studied it, I was halfway through when I realized I was reading about the triumphal entry. That was Palm Sunday, the beginning of Passion Week. Matthew gives that week 8 out of 28 chapters. Mark gives it 6 out of 16. Luke gives it 5.5 out of 24. But John gives it an entire half of his book. That's how important this week was to him, and shows how much he learned that last week. Of course, as an old man looking back on the time he spent with Jesus, that last week would have been the most special and meaningful of all weeks in John's life. And he wants to share every little detail he remembered with us. So in the first 12 chapters, Jesus' public teaching, preaching, and healing ministry dominates. But chapter 13 through 16, Jesus spends privately in the upper room with his disciples, teaching them things that they would only understand later, and giving them promises they could cling to in the future. I love how John prefaces this section. Now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come, that he should depart from this world to be with the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. Throughout his ministry, Jesus had modeled love for his disciples, and he would continue to do so as he washed their feet, gave them special promises, and then prayed for them in chapter 17. And he would tell them specifically to be sure to love each other as he had loved them, as they'd seen him model love, so they could be models for others. But what did it mean that he loved them to the end? It couldn't mean he loved them until his death, because we know he loved them way after that, and still does. In fact, since Jesus is God, and thus eternal, he doesn't have an end. But the Greek word here doesn't mean end of a point of time. It means to the utmost, or completely. He loved them so much that he was determined to see this through to the end so that they could receive salvation. In chapter 15, he tells them, "Greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends." He loved them that much. And looking around the Passover table into each of the faces of the beloved disciples, Jesus knew all the humiliation, pain, heartache, suffering of this night and the next day would all be worth it. And the thing is, it wasn't just for the love of these men that he loved to the end. His love for us, believers down through the ages, brought him to the cross. His love for you. He loves you, my friend, to the end, to the completion of your redemption. Jesus and the disciples sat in that upper room that night, under the shadow of the cross. Everything Jesus said and did in that upper room that night showed his love for them and for us, part of his own whom he loved. So we can read these chapters and feel his love for us because we are gifts to Jesus from the Father, like the disciples. He has set us apart as his own people to be his hands and feet, to show his love to the world. We can rest in his love, work in his love, and always be sure of his love. How does this make you feel to know that Jesus loves you completely, to the end? Jesus knew the disciples would fail him and leave him alone. He knew their hearts that very moment at the table were prideful and self-centered, as they'd been discussing who would be top dog in his kingdom that they were sure he was about to set up. He knew they'd mess up and deny him and let fear overcome them. Just like he knows all of our faults, sins, ungodly attitudes, and failures. And yes, he still loves us to the end. How does knowing his powerful love in our own life help us to love others?
You can contact us at treasurehuntintheword@gmail.com. We'd love to hear the treasures God has given you through his word. You can listen to other episodes on our website, which you can find in the description below. Thank you for listening, and remember, where your treasure is, there will your heart be also.